Welcome to our deep dive into the Assyrian Empire. You've sent over a ton of material on this ancient civilization, books, articles, even some academic papers. And let me tell you, I'm already sensing this is going to be fascinating. We're going beyond the usual, battles and conquests to uncover a different side of the Assyrians, their art, their culture, and what daily life was like.
It's a perspective often overshadowed by their military achievements, but it's crucial to understand this other dimension to fully grasp who the Assyrians were.
Totally. I'm with you there. We often just picture these, fierce warriors. But what about their softer side? So where do we even begin with all this?
Well, their art offers a compelling starting point. The Assyrians were masters of visual storytelling, particularly through their intricate palace reliefs. Imagine walking through these grand halls adorned with incredibly detailed carvings, almost like graphic novels etched in stone.
You've got me picturing those famous lion hunt reliefs, the lion hunt of Ashurbanipal, right? Incredible detail, lions leaping, arrows flying, the king looking, totally in control. It's no wonder they're so iconic.
Exactly, and they were designed to be iconic. Remember, these reliefs weren't just decorative. They were powerful tools of propaganda.
Hold on, propaganda. Are we talking ancient spin doctors here?
In a way, yes. Every scene, every figure was carefully chosen to convey specific messages about the king and the empire. Take the lion hunt scenes. They showcase the king's bravery, his strength, his ability to overcome even the most fearsome beasts. It was a way of demonstrating his, fitness to rule and his connection to the divine.
So it's like, hey, everyone, look how strong and courageous I am. Totally worthy of your loyalty, right?
Precisely. And they didn't limit themselves to hunting scenes. We also see depictions of religious rituals, the king receiving tribute from conquered peoples, all reinforcing the idea of his absolute power and authority. It was a visual language designed to impress and intimidate.
Wow. So these reliefs were basically giant billboards proclaiming the might of the Assyrian Empire. But it wasn't just the carvings, was it? Their architecture was pretty impressive too, right?
Absolutely. Assyrian architecture was all about scale and grandeur. Think massive stone foundations, imposing walls, and gateways guarded by those colossal Lamassu statues. Have you ever seen images of those?
Oh, you mean those human-headed winged bulls and lions? They're pretty hard to forget.
Exactly. They were strategically placed at entrances, not just as decorations, but to project an aura of power and divine protection. Imagine approaching a city gate with these towering mythical creatures staring down at you. Talk about making a statement.
I'm getting some serious don't mess with us vibes.
Yeah.
Like they were saying, this is Assyria and we're here to stay. But let's move beyond the stone and muscle. We know the Assyrians were fierce warriors and builders, but what about their intellectual side? What did they value in terms of knowledge and culture?
Well, the Assyrians had a deep respect for knowledge and learning. And perhaps the most compelling evidence of this is the discovery of King Ashurbanipal's library in Nineveh.
I've heard of this. It wasn't just a bookshelf in the king's study, right?
Not even close. This was a vast collection of clay tablets, tens of thousands of them, covering a range of subjects from history and law to literature and even magic. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of a national library.
Wow, a national library filled with clay tablets. Must have taken ages to find anything in there. What kind of stuff did they actually collect?
Well, a fascinating highlight is their preservation of the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's a tale of adventure, friendship, and the search for immortality themes that resonate even today. But here's the catch. This epic originated in Sumer, a civilization that predated the Assyrians.
So they were curating and preserving stories from other cultures. That's pretty cool.
It is, and it tells us something about their worldview. The Assyrians weren't just focused on their own achievements. They recognized the value of other cultures and traditions. They saw themselves as inheritors of this broader intellectual heritage.
Like they were saying, hey, these old Sumerian stories are pretty awesome. We need to make sure they don't get lost. It makes you wonder what else they considered valuable from those earlier civilizations.
That's a great question, and it leads us to another intriguing aspect of Assyrian culture: their social structure and the roles women played within it. It might surprise you to learn that Assyrian women, especially those of noble birth, held more power and influence than you might expect in a society seemingly dominated by warrior kings.
Really? More power than we usually associate with women in ancient societies. Tell me more. This is getting interesting. So we're talking about Assyrian women, and you're saying they had more clout than we might think. Spill the detail.
Well, while Assyrian society was patriarchal, women weren't simply confined to the domestic sphere. For instance, the queen, referred to as the Lady of the Palace, wielded significant authority. She wasn't just the king's wife, she had her own administrative duties, managed palace affairs, and even participated in religious ceremonies.
So she was kind of like the COO of the whole palace operation. Pretty impressive. But was it just the queen, or did other women have positions of influence too?
There's evidence that noble women could own property, engage in trade, and even participate in legal proceedings. Some sources even suggest they had a voice in political matters, advising their husbands and sons. It's a reminder that the lives of women in ancient societies were often more complex and varied than we might assume.
This is painting a much richer picture of Assyrian society than just the warlords and kings we usually hear about. It makes you wonder what everyday life was like for the average Assyrian family. Did they even have time for anything besides, avoiding getting conquered by their neighbors?
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives of empires. But we shouldn't forget that these empires were made up of real people living their lives. And for the average Assyrian, family and community played a central role.
Okay, so tell me about an average Assyrian family. What did their homes look like? Did they all live in, mud huts?
Not quite mud huts. Excavations reveal a range of housing styles, from simple dwellings to more elaborate homes for wealthier families. They often lived in extended family units with multiple generations sharing a home. This emphasis on family ties provided a sense of stability and support in a world that could be unpredictable and often dangerous.
Makes sense. Close-knit families probably help them deal with all the stresses of living in a powerful but often volatile empire. But what about beyond the family? What filled their days? Was it just work, work, work?
Of course, work was essential for survival, but the Assyrians weren't just workaholics. They also had a vibrant cultural life. As we discussed earlier, religion was a big part of their lives, and temples weren't just for worship. They were community centers where people gathered for festivals, celebrations, and social events.
So kind of a combination of a town hall, a marketplace, and a place of worship all rolled into one.
Exactly. And when it came to leisure, the Assyrians knew how to have fun. Hunting was a popular pastime for the elite, echoing those grand lion hunt scenes we talked about earlier. But for everyday folks, there were board games, music, storytelling.
Hold on, board games. Were they playing like ancient versions of Monopoly or something?
Maybe not Monopoly, but archaeologists have found game boards and pieces that suggest they enjoyed strategy games. Imagine a family gathered around a table, challenging each other to a game after a long day. It really humanizes these people from a distant past.
It really does. It's like looking through a window into their lives and realizing that, hey, they weren't so different from us after all. They valued family, they enjoyed a good time, and they appreciated the finer things in life. Speaking of which, we touched on their architecture, but their art went beyond those palace reliefs, right?
Absolutely. They decorated their homes and public spaces with intricate carvings, sculptures, and even colorful glazed bricks. They had a keen eye for aesthetics and craftsmanship.
So they weren't just tough warriors, but also artisans and craftsmen. Did they have their own particular style, something that sets their art apart from other ancient cultures?
That's an interesting question, and while Assyrian art shares some similarities with other Mesopotamian cultures, it also has its own distinct features.
I'm all ears. What makes their artistic style unique?
Well, one of the defining characteristics of Assyrian art is its focus on detail and realism. Take those palace reliefs, for example. The artists paid meticulous attention to anatomy, movement, and even the textures of fabrics and animal fur. They weren't simply trying to create beautiful images, they were striving to capture the world around them as accurately as possible.
So it's almost like they were documenting their lives through their art.
In a sense, yes. Their art provides us with a window into their world, their beliefs, their values, and their daily experiences. And while the grandeur of their palaces and the ferocity of their warriors often capture our attention, it's important to remember that behind those monumental achievements were real people who laughed, loved, and created beauty in a world often filled with hardship and uncertainty.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just about dates and battles, it's about people. And the Assyrians, for all their military might, were just as human as we are today. But let's circle back to their empire. We've been talking a lot about their culture and daily life, but what about the nuts and bolts of their empire? How did they manage to become so powerful, and what ultimately led to their decline?
Well, their rise to power was a gradual process spanning centuries. They weren't always the dominant force in Mesopotamia. In fact, they started out as a relatively small kingdom in northern Mesopotamia.
So how did they go from, like, small-time kingdom to rulers of this vast empire? Was it just, military strength?
Military prowess was definitely a key factor. The Assyrians were incredibly organized and disciplined warriors. They developed advanced military techniques, including siege warfare and the use of iron weapons, which gave them an edge over their rivals.
So they were early adopters of iron weapons. That must have given them a significant advantage in battle. But it couldn't have been just, brute force, right?
You're right. It was more than just brute force. They were also brilliant strategists and administrators. They built a complex network of roads and communication systems to maintain control over their vast territories. And they were masters of logistics, ensuring that their armies were well supplied even on long campaigns.
It sounds like they were incredibly efficient, almost like a well-oiled military machine.
That's a great analogy. They also employed a system of tribute, demanding resources and manpower from conquered peoples. This influx of wealth and labor fueled their expansion and allowed them to maintain a large standing army.
So it was a combination of military might, strategic thinking, and effective resource management. But even the most powerful empires eventually crumble, what ultimately led to the downfall of the Assyrian Empire.
Well, empires are complex systems, and their decline is rarely due to a single cause. In the case of the Assyrians, a combination of factors contributed to their downfall. Internally, there were succession struggles, rebellions, and economic problems. They had stretched their resources thin, trying to maintain control over such a vast territory.
It's like they overextended themselves,
Yeah.
becoming too big to manage effectively. Kind of classic case of imperial overreach.
Exactly. And externally, they faced increasing pressure from enemies like the Babylonians and the Medes, who eventually formed an alliance and sacked the Assyrian capital of Nineveh in 612 BC, effectively marking the end of the Assyrian Empire.
Wow, what a dramatic end to a once mighty empire.
Right.
Almost Shakespearean, the rise and fall of the Assyrians. But even though their empire is gone, their legacy lives on, right? And
Yeah.
we're talking about them thousands of years later.
Absolutely. Their contributions to art, architecture, literature, and military science had a lasting impact on the ancient world and continue to fascinate us today. And let's not forget the rediscovery of King Ashurbanipal's library, which has provided invaluable insights into Assyrian culture and the broader history of Mesopotamia.
It's amazing to think that those clay tablets survived for centuries, buried under the ruins of Nineveh, waiting to be unearthed and share their secrets with the world.
It truly is a testament to the enduring power of the written word and the human desire to preserve knowledge across generations. And it makes you realize that the Assyrians, despite their reputation as, fearsome warriors, also had a deep appreciation for learning and culture.
It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of the Assyrians with you. We've seen them as more than just conquerors, haven't we? They were skilled artists, builders, storytellers, and even librarians in a way. It's given me a whole new perspective on this ancient civilization.
I agree. It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white. Even the most powerful empires are made up of individuals with complex lives and motivations. And by delving deeper beyond the surface narratives, we can gain a richer understanding of the past and its connections to our present.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this thought. If the Assyrians, with all their might and power, could be captivated by stories like the Epic of Gilgamesh, passed down from another culture, what stories from our own time will endure and resonate with future generations? Something to ponder, isn't it?